gets a goal? Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, so we're back following a better weekend all round, featuring a celebratory voice note for Saliba's goal sent to me while I was in a pit of despair having benched him for Ben White. I hate that guy, Sam, I really do. Although the lucky assist for the 6th goal happily gave me some succour. As we stand on the edge of the first mainline deployment of chip use in the season and kind of the big headline double game week, the first one. I think obviously there's been a smaller one, but we're here for that one to zoom in on what's going down. I'm joined by the sender of that voice note in error, of course, Sam. How are you, mate? All good?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Firstly, I'd like to officially apologise for that voice note. It was very innocent at the time. I genuinely forgot that you'd benched Saliba. So I sent him a little voice note with the Saliba song. And then as I was sending the voice note, I saw the rest of the messages he was sending. I was like, I've really messed up here. But anyway, it didn't matter because, as I told you, White had plenty of time left to get some sort of points on the board. And it didn't really hurt us that much anyway. So, yeah, overall, a good week for both of us, I think. I think we're both pretty much nailed onto green arrows as it stands. And yeah, we're in a much more positive mood than at the start of last week's show before the Foden hat-trick, of course. In the meantime, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, the content play will be about loading up for the double or doubles, as we know are coming on the horizon. In this case, a mid-season double, which carries a lot of promise with two of the biggest teams having those doubles, but following blanks and throwing up strategic problems from those said blanks, how do we want to balance the urge to buy in a lot of the doublers versus the onward team balance that we're going to have to consider? Bold Claims makes a return this week once again, back to blanks again, unfortunately for both of us, but we weren't a million miles off. Game week preview, again, a new format that we trialed last week. It seemed to go quite well, so we'll go again on that one. For the second half of the pod, we'll be previewing the next game week rather than assessing the more strategic topics that we will be doing in the first half and covering all the big questions as we try and get locked in for double game week 25. Of course, within that, we'll have listener questions as well, so no worries there. It is Monday, the 12th of Feb. It is halftime in the Palace-Chelsea game. 1-0 to Palace at the moment, a Lerma screamer, and nothing to speak of from Palmer so far, who is in both of our teams. Fingers crossed for a better turnout in the second half, but it's not looking great at the moment. However, shall we move on to scores on the doors for the time being?
Yeah, let's do it then. And you've had just a couple of the Saliba versus White, and just the Trent versus Doughty seem to have been kind of the main differences for you, getting even more out of my reach just by just 1 point at a time, really, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, I'll take those narrow wins as they come. I mean, this week has been great. I think I sent you another less offensive voice note before the game week started saying I felt really positive about this week. I thought we both looked really well set up.
Yeah,
I was quite positive about the way that we've sort of landed on a good run for our teams, and hopefully that will continue into double game week 25 as well. But so it proved to be for once as well. So 81 points from me so far. That's including Palmer's 1 point at half time. That could increase. It could also decrease. But either way, that's 400k up to 252 as it stands. So I'm very, very happy with that. That's good progress. And with the doubles and chip season on the horizon, I'm glad to have a couple of back-to-back green arrows now to hopefully help me start catapulting up the ranks. But yeah, we'll take it one game week at a time for now. Saliba's goal, I was on the ceiling. Saka scored twice in that game as well. I was beyond the ceiling and somehow up in space and brought down to earth a little bit by Gabriel on the day. But yeah, overall, very happy. It could yet get better or worse, but either way, it should be a pretty sizable green arrow for now.
Yeah, nice. Similar kind of story for me, slightly fewer points, 74, 25% green arrow though still, which is always very nice, up to the top 400k, I think, off the benches. I think it's kind of, we'll see what happens with Palmer. A couple of notes from this weekend. The first one, which I thought was hilarious, is the enduring narrative, Arsenal ever centre forward. laid out by Sky as a result, being the root of all of the attacking sort of inertia. Fantastically boring, isn't it? Supercharged by Gary Neville in particular. He seems to seize on it every single time he's in the commentary box. And the commentator, I forget who it was, and Alan Smith, they were both saying it early doors in the West Ham game, and it really quickly evaporated. And it never got spoken of again after that. But yeah, no, it's a very, very annoying little narrative that seems to have cropped up a lot. He was forgetting, Man City pre-Haaland. And yeah, very grumpy when Saliba scored. I think it was that feeling that, I'm missing out on points being scored yet again through like a simple sort of benching decision. Extremely fortunate as well with the White assist for Rice. I mean, both Odegaard and Trossard, they both went, and both left it, and Rice was able to then pick it up and curl in a screamer from miles outside the area. I think just completely aided and abetted by the fact that West Ham had effectively down tools. So yeah, very lucky, but I'll take it. Geez, so only 3 points were actually lost by that decision. But Saliba's definitely playing next week. Lesson learned, which will no doubt mean that White goes on a tear. That all good. Doughty came in for Taylor. Was a very close call between selling him and Burn. And I kind of wish I'd done Burn, to be honest, but never mind. I think the news before company said, "Oh, he's looking better," was that he was out for a little while. So you never know with these sorts of players that aren't particularly kind of high profile. Doughty, 9 chances created and no returns. So yeah, unfortunate, but hopefully all good going forwards, etc., and so on and so on. And yeah, decent green arrow in the top 400k now. Anyway, and much to consider ahead of double game week to come. Cool. And let's start before we kind of go into nuts and bolts of it, with this week's kind of contemplate overarching idea, which is this sort of notion of loading up on doublers. People always say the pro template sort of argument, and I've certainly heard it on a couple of pieces of FPL content I've really listened to today. I can't resist buying doublers. I can't resist loading up completely. So, in case you're living under a rock, 4 teams double this weekend, or this weekend next week. There are Liverpool, who've got Brentford away and Luton at home. Man City with 2 home games, Chelsea and Brentford. Luton, who've got Man United at home and Liverpool away. And Brentford, who've got Liverpool at home and Man City away. But there's the added complication, we spoke about this a little while ago, but just in case you need a refresher, there's a blank in 26 for 2 of those teams who are doubling this week. So Luton, Liverpool blank, plus Chelsea and Spurs also blank, and they're kind of FPL relevant teams, so worth noting there. So I suppose we should ask, how do we load up for a double in general? But I think this one specifically, let's just kind of home in on this one, because it gets too complicated to talk about sort of kind of imaginary doubles and things like that. Luandile asks, what's the one piece of advice for next week? And I suppose that kind of gets to the nub of the issue, Sam. I suppose, people will say kind of that contemplate sort of idea. I can't resist. I'm going to try to get as many doubles as possible and sod the sort of ramifications the next week, especially with this blank incoming. I mean, how do you see all of this?
Yeah, so I think if there was one piece of advice, it would be don't lose your head this game week. Don't throw the plans out the window just because there are 4 teams doubling. Obviously, Man City and Liverpool are going to be very, very important. Man City probably slightly more so at the moment, but I would say the importance of those teams revolve around a very select group of players. And outside of that group of players, I probably wouldn't lose my head just making sure I had 6 doublers from those 2 teams and then try and pile in on Luton and Brentford as well. There are specific players within those teams that I think will be important, but just getting coverage at random or at any cost to get as many double game weekers as possible seems like in this particular double to be a little bit of an issue, especially with 2 of those teams, as you already correctly mentioned, having a blank the following week. Planning is going to be really important. And obviously chip season is on the horizon. A lot of people were considering free hits in game week 26, but then planning comes into it as well, doesn't it? Because then if you're free hitting in 26, that's at the cost of free hitting in 29 or maybe even in 34, which is another potentially touted time to free hit. So again, just planning ahead and having a think about, okay, what is the opportunity cost of using these things now but piling into all of these players now? How will that affect me down the line? Even if it's not directly the next game week or the next few game weeks, losing a chip now could mean bigger problems in the future. So it's just measuring how those doubles affect your season right now, how much weight you put on the specific players within those doubles, and trying to weigh up how important they are to have this particular game week. Because at the end of the day, points will be scored in game week 26, game week 27, and so on. It's not all going to be scored in this game week. So maybe it's not worth just piling in on any random player.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And I think that hopefully remains sort of the edge that engaged managers will have. And I suspect we'll see it, that people in game week 26 will end up free hitting. Lots of kind of semi-engaged, casual, whatever you want to call them, managers will see there's a problem and they'll use that free hit chip immediately. And the hope is that kind of means that there's an advantage for those of us who are prepared for that. And I think, just to arc into behavioral science very quickly, this is definitely kind of linked to this idea of involvement and the two typologies of it. So there's kind of one which is situational and one which is kind of enduring. And it's really easy. I think the easiest thing to do is explain situational here because it makes enduring really clear as well. So situational involvement, Sam, say I'm buying a new dishwasher, or maybe better actually, I got a new car recently. So yeah, say I'm looking to buy a new car. Now, I don't care about cars. I have no interest in them whatsoever. I just simply don't care. They've never interested me as long as they're not embarrassing to drive like my old car was. But it was just so old and crap. But I was in the scenario where I had to find out about cars to make a decision on what to buy. So for a while, something, it wasn't a long time, but I really had to get into understanding cars, which fit sort of the specifications that me and my partner wanted. So we wanted the car with enough space for a baby and all her accoutrements, good fuel efficiency. The old car's really expensive to run, and kind of ideally hybrid or electric, because they're more eco-friendly. So looking around, and I was quite up on cars for a while in the market and what all the options were. I knew loads about it, but as soon as I ordered my car, Sam, all of that knowledge simply just sieved away. I just had no interest in maintaining that sort of interest in the category.
Sounds like all of my uni lectures, by the way.
Yeah, same with me. English literature, don't remember anything about it. Chinese economics, forgotten completely. Who cares? Got my piece of paper, I'm out of there. And it's due to necessity. But once the task had been completed, I didn't have that sort of sustained interest to convert that situational involvement into an enduring one. I don't care about cars enough. I didn't care enough about English. I didn't care enough about Chinese economics. And this can be the same for some FPL managers, to bring it back to FPL. There's fewer of them now, for sure. There's fewer kind of less engaged people, and probably even fewer listening or watching us. But they're kind of the classic sort of casual. Their engagement is situational. Log in once a week, see who scored points, maybe take a look at next week's fixtures, make a transfer, look at the captain decision, and then they log off and leave it till next week. They don't have that kind of depth of interest. And that means their decision making is very much kind of hand to mouth. See a situation, deal with it. Week to week. Injury, take a transfer. Need to change my captain because Salah's got better fixture than Haaland. I'll do it. So people will see there's blanks next week and just might free hit without looking ahead. And I guarantee you some will. They just don't care about FPL enough to get into it. And that's kind of the contrast between them and us engaged managers, the anoraks who have that enduring engagement. So we go beyond the surface. We analyze things like long-term strategy, underlying data, like using the car analogy again. This is people who look at things like horsepower and handling smoothness and whatever, all the details that I just don't really care about. And due to that engagement, we do have an edge in this little period. It's worth saying the edge has been eroded a lot in recent years due to the rise of what you might call spoon-fed content, although a lot of it is from friends of ours who I've got no problem with that at all, because I welcome the fact that more people are engaged in FPL. I welcome the fact that that information has been put out there. But it's worth saying this is why chip season and things like patterns and online data, which are often too kind of complex for vanilla content providers in particular to package in digestible detail, means that there is still a little bit of an edge for us engaged managers with that sort of sense of enduring involvement. So basically, be assured things aren't going to be as bad, aren't going to stay as bad, I suppose, throughout the kind of the next little while, if not doing as well as you'd like. Like chip season, I think, Sam, always tends to be a net gain if you're reasonably engaged. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, it's always where I've had my most joy. And I know that if I reach chip season, what we would classically term as chip season, in and around the top few 100K, then I've got a good shout of finishing at a respectable rank that I'd be happy with. So yeah, I think if we were to look back at our last 7-8 seasons playing FPL each, and and measure out our net gain versus loss over chip season, I think we would all, especially it's just if you're listening to this podcast as well, maybe if you've got those results to look back on, I think it'd be interesting to see just how many red arrows are within that period where you've used the chips. And I would quite strongly suggest that you're not going to have too many. Generally speaking, there will be the odd freak result, of course, but I think over chip season, as a cumulative result, you would be massively up, generally speaking. So, yeah, I think overall, this is where we gain the most of our edge. And it's not necessarily the week-to-week stuff. It's more the way you navigate the entire river of the game weeks coming. And that might be a bit of a strained metaphor, but you've got to, in a bit like that, like what's the sport called? Is it like kayaking where you're like in and out? Yeah, and you're basically lining up for the next bit of rapids. And I think that's what we're doing in FPL at the moment. But like you said, there are a lot of managers out there that see the first thing coming and they're like, right, there's a rock in the middle, I need to get round.
Yeah.
But actually, not just getting around, but positioning yourself well for the next rapids, the next rock in the way, it will be really important to us. So that's where we gain our edge. By the way, Conor Gallagher's just scored. I just got the live notification. So if you want to timestamp the pod, that's where we're at right now.
Isn't it? You can hear the whoosh. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that kind of leads us to thinking about this idea that, I can't resist doublers, because I think there will be those who go full tilt. But I think the majority of people who say I can't resist doublers, what they mean is I can't resist doublers within reason. I can't resist doublers without compromising my long-term strategy, which is kind of quite a prosaic kind of conclusion to come to, but it's absolutely true. Like having that balance is key, because I need to ensure in my situation, in your situation, probably in everyone's situation, that we've got good coverage, but also a plan going forward to deal with the next road bumps, to deal with that next rock in the middle of the figurative rapids that you're going down. So I suppose kind of thinking about kind of what we've got ahead, there's this idea that if you're taking hits, or at least using transfers to bring players in this week, it is kind of at your own detriment effectively, because you're putting those points in the bank. So for example, for me this week, I could buy Luis Diaz, for example, because I've got like Anthony Gordon, I've got Cole Palmer, I could potentially remove. The problem is that if I then move that forward in game week 26, I'm suddenly down to 8 men. So I'm going to have to take a -4 or a -8 to get -8 to get to 11, -4 to get to 10. It kind of starts to get a bit sort of detrimental to my outcomes. And then if I go to 29, I've got to use transfer to. I've used transfer to bring him in. I've got to use another transfer to get him out. And then I've got to use another transfer somewhere else probably to get even more players in 29, because I've suddenly got kind of 6 or 7 players. Whereas if I use the transfer this week more effectively, then by 29, I can have 8 or 9 players versus kind of 6 or 7. And there's all these sort of downstream, to continue the kayaking metaphor, impacts from the decisions you make at the moment. But there'll be those, Sam, who say, you know what? No, someone like Luis Diaz this week, who, even though they've got blank in 26 and they got blank 29, you can't help but look at those 2 fixtures for Liverpool and think, you know what, I'm just going to load up, just go for it, no matter what, and bugger the consequences. And I suppose weighing that up is something that, do you think comes with experience, or do you think it just kind of is situational still? For me, I think it is kind of, it kind of does come with experience. When back in the day, I used to kind of try to get as many players as possible in that double, no matter what.
Yeah, I think experience does weigh into it a little bit, because we've all been burnt by those types of players before. More specifically in single game weeks, I think in single game weeks, when we see like a really juicy fixture, we want to pile in on a team, we want to pile in on a player. And obviously there are situations where it does work out, but you also remember the situations where it definitely doesn't. And I think those kind of consequences are more exaggerated and burnt into our memories when it's double game weeks, because we're probably looking beyond the standard selection of maybe 50 FPL relevant assets quite often. And we're looking towards players that we'd otherwise never really consider. And we're only really looking at them because they've got the double game week. Now, Luis Diaz isn't quite that far down the rabbit hole. He's not down in like the 200-300th favorite player in FPL, but
Jensen,
Jensen's a good example that someone seems to be very, very interested in, or was until he got injured, apparently. But anyway, so there are players that I think obviously every now and then they will return. So piling in on a double game week does make sense to an extent. You are taking a chance, you are buying a ticket for that lottery, and you're getting 2 tickets because they play twice. So that's fantastic. However, is buying those tickets worth it when you look at the -4s you're going to have to take, especially in this situation specifically with the blanks coming, with piling into 3 starting Liverpool players, especially with the risks around minutes in a select few of them anyway, and Luton players as well with the blank next game week. I would urge caution looking beyond the players that we know are reliable enough. And that is, again, a strained one because Darwin is anything but reliable, but he's got the underlying data. He's got the consistent minutes recently and good performances recently. Whereas if you look a little bit further down the pecking order, I'm not sure you can guarantee the returns in the same way or get as much chance of those returns. Luis Diaz is kind of right on the edge of those two. I'm not really sure which he falls into, so he might not be the best example, but he's not a player that I'm particularly interested in this game week, mainly because there are just so many other midfielders I like the look of. But yeah, there are certainly lots of players in this double game week, especially in Luton and Brentford, that otherwise we would just not be looking at no matter what. And the last thing I want to do is bin off really good single game week players and players that suit my strategy long term, which we'll come on to in a later section, just for the sake of chasing the upside for 1 week, knowing that in itself is a risk. And then as soon as game week 25 kicks off and you're looking at your game week 26 team, you're thinking, why have I got Jensen in my starting 11? Like that is the problem that I'd want to try and forecast and map out ahead of time.
Yeah, I do think though, I know it's obviously a bit of a joke, that's the whole thing, but the wider point about Brentford in particular, in this scenario, is that there's always sort of potentially one team that tick all the boxes. So even though it's not the best double game week in the world, appreciate that. You're buying 2 tickets in the lottery, of course. Brentford are really good. Like obviously outside of Jensen, you've got Reguilon, Flecken, Tony. If Mbeumo was fit, I suspect he'd be in pretty much all of our teams because they kind of tick all the boxes. They've got double 25, games in 26 and 29 guaranteed. So there's always in any sort of situation that we're in when we're looking at which player do I bring in for a particular double, plus I've got to navigate these sort of ongoing obstacles. There's always sort of one team which can help you out potentially. But you're right that having a coherent plan for transfers is key. And I think you've got to accept that you probably will need a hit or two as well. And the blank mate and also in double, I'm not particularly concerned about. I wouldn't be kind of saying take a -8, take a -12 or anything like that. I know that Andy Martin, for example, was advocating taking a -12 to get to 11 players in the blank. But I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't kind of advocate going that far because you give yourself too much to do, as we all sort of know. But having the odd 1 or 2 just to kind of course correct and ensure you're kind of optimizing your team is absolutely fine, isn't it? And I suppose the final bit of this, if you are kind of in balance mode and you're kind of rejecting the idea that you can't resist going overboard, you're not going to be doing that. You're going to be kind of, yes, okay, it's a double. I want to kind of lean into it, but I don't want to kind of completely capsize given the fact that I've leaped too far. Well, we've done so many nautical school puns here, Sam.
Sorry, I started it off.
That's all right. And what's the sort of the minimum number of doublers you're looking at for kind of 25? We'll talk about specific players in a second, but I mean, I don't know, for me, it seems kind of 5, 6, maybe even 4 would be all right, as long as the key men are sort of covered.
I think 4 is the answer for me personally. I don't think you need to have 5 or 6. If you've got beyond that as well, there are very likely going to be issues next week because you've probably got the 3 Liverpool, maybe a Luton in there as well. And then most teams have a couple of Spurs or Chelsea assets in there too. So I think once you get beyond 6, unless you've got a plan to free hit the next week, most teams I've seen would have a hit basically banked for next game week unless they've done some really good planning. They've got 2 free transfers and they know exactly where those transfers are going to sit next week. But I think 4 is probably the baseline. I think under that, I think you're not covering off all of the most important ones. I think 2 City, 2 Liverpool, especially based on the importance of those select 2 City and 2 Liverpool. I think will be fairly important. And then beyond that, getting the third City right and the third Liverpool right could bring you towards a really nice 6. Outside of that, you can maybe have a combination of 2 City, 2 Liverpool, and then maybe an Ivan Toney or a Alfie Doughty like you've got, or maybe even a double game week keeper. Any one of the 4, I don't really mind either. But I think once you go beyond 6 or 7, you're quite likely, unless you've really, really prepared the hell out of it, to have issues in the next couple of game weeks as well. So I think 4 is probably the minimum that I'd be happy with. And then after that, as long as I've covered the correct bases, after that, everything's a bonus, really.
Lovely. All right. Well, I think that segues us very nicely into the week ahead. I suppose we're sort of pro template. Yeah, can't just buy doublers. Of course, you can buy doublers, but just make sure that you've got consideration for the time ahead. Week ahead preview starts, of course, with bold claims. The week ahead, this whole sort of part of the pod is kind of the B story off the headline act. But this week, we've got a lot more to talk about in this half. So I think we kind of just speed through. But bold claims, here we are, still 6-5 to me. It didn't quite work out, although I think both claims were absolutely kind of valid claims.
We're in the ballpark with both, yeah. So I went with 4+ goals and Spurs Brighton. The underlying XG numbers in the match suggest it was unlucky not to, and obviously we got to 3 goals. So yeah, not a million miles off, but obviously we don't get points for nearlies, as you found out with Darwin this week as well. Didn't quite hit the 10-point haul, but looked good again.
Yep, good header, but other than that, didn't quite get there. Yes, I think it was a big chance miss, wasn't it, at the very end, which cost him. It cost him at least 1 bonus. I think he kind of got 1 kind of tacked on at the very end. Obviously, got his customary yellow card as well, and both things, which kind of relegated him sadly to just the 6 that he ended up with. God, I'm glad I didn't captain him in the end, though. It's definitely seriously in consideration. And this week, where are you going?
Yeah, so I'm going with a slightly different one because it's double game week season. I thought it'd be fun to lean into that. I think we both have. So for me, I'm going with 12+ goals combined between Man City and Liverpool in the double game week. So that might not sound too bold, but that's an average of 3+ goals per match that each of these teams play in. So I think over the spread, that's pretty bold. If we reach 12+, we're going to be hitting some really decent scores in FPL as well, you'd assume, if any of the main hitters go off. So yeah, fingers crossed for that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that, and obviously we hope having at least 2 Man City players in attacking capacity, that's going to happen, and also 2 Liverpool as well. And I've gone for a centre back being the highest point scorer of this this double game week. That is pretty bold, I think. But I just remember in the past, like John Stones and stuff, completely smashing it. Would you be surprised by Van Dijk scoring a couple of headers in both the games, or hopefully if we do both go for him, like it was Big Button in second, but Nathan Ake doing that? It does always seem to be that centre backs comes to the fore in these sorts of double game week scenarios. Admittedly, the fixtures aren't as good as they have been in the past, but still, that is where I'm going for the bold claim this week. Cool.
Lovely.
So the key 3 issues for this week: setting up for double game 25, of course, same as last week, but obviously still endures. Do a triple captain, and selling single game weekers for doublers and things like that, because that is definitely on the agenda. Got a couple of AOB bits as well to discuss at the end. Yes, first question: best captain this week. Well, I think it's probably more options, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you're not watching on YouTube, it's just one big image of Haaland rubbing his hands together. I think he is going to be the obvious one for most, right? I think most people, knowing that he's been given decent minutes recently, he's back fully fit and firing. I'd be surprised if he wasn't in and around 200% ownership this game week in terms of effective ownership. So yeah, he'll be heavily favoured. There are other options. KDB might not be a bad shout, and then you've got the Liverpool boys with the double as well. So there will be the odd person out there who will try and go against the grain, but I think most of us will accept that he is the highest expected haul for double game week 25 with good reason. It's 2 home games, so City don't even need to travel. They've got the Champions League in and around double game week 25, but it is against Copenhagen. So I mean, they'll put up a fight. They've made it to the Champions League knockout round, so that's absolutely fair enough. But you would expect Man City to probably progress at a canter generally. So you'd expect City chasing the league down at the moment. They've got teams to catch right now. They do have the game in hand, of course, but you'd expect them to be going full guns, all guns blazing, and Haaland's going to be a big part of that with 2 home games against quite leaky defenses recently. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense not just to captain him, but obviously this section is also talking about whether it is the correct opportunity to use the triple captaincy chip on him.
Yeah, FPL review expected points is 13.7 for the double game week, which is good enough. I think I'm absolutely fine with that. Obviously, so it happens with Copenhagen and things like that. But I feel like there's going to be no contest really. 300,000 transfers in for Haaland already, up 0.5 since he came back from injury. I did predict that at the time. We both kind of mentioned that because ownership had dropped so much that his price is only going to skyrocket, and it has, much of the consternation of quite a few people who are, it seems to always happen, shouting that it's a conspiracy or something like that. But that's kind of what happens. I think this week actually, I should say, the effective ownership was still low enough to be all right. I mean, it's kind of 120, 130 kind of percent. I suspect that's going to kind of completely right itself, and you're probably looking at kind of 100. As long as it's under 200%, that would be nice. If it's above 200%, well, it doesn't matter, it's be triple. But yeah, hopefully there'll be some people will talk themselves out of Haaland. I hope some. I don't know what the justification would be, but any kind of people who don't captain Haaland is great, and the usual sort of pricey advice sort of fits in there. Just let other people make the mistake of not when we're kind of looking at going with him. And do triple. James from Planet, who's got a very good sort of handle on kind of upcoming fixtures, kind of did say it's as good as it gets. I haven't listened to this week's pod, but I think the Solanke 28. Could be, if you aren't interested in this one, could be another sort of juncture that you might want to go for it. Sheffield United at home and Luton at home, and that's a good double. So that could be kind of a time to go for it, or whatever 37 and 34 throw up. If you don't want a triple here, could be the way to go. I don't know. I just feel like it's absolutely fine, especially now because it's a bit more predictable potentially around. I know they've got Copenhagen, but I can't imagine it's going to upend things too much. I think if there was an injury to Haaland, I think that I wouldn't triple captain. I think that I'd then sort of move to bench boosting this week. But that's only if that didn't happen. At the moment, I think it's just got to be that I just go with that, really. I mean, I have looked at the bench boost, if I'm honest. We've spoken about that in the past, that you get the bench boost out of the way here, rest of the season you then focus on your first 11 and kind of don't have to kind of be too concerned about the bench. And I'm not too far off bench boost, to be honest, Sam. I mean, I've got
nor am I.
We remove 1 or 2 players and we're kind of there, but it does feel a bit forcey right now, for me at least. But if you are in a position, I think there's definitely to bench boost and your team is kind of looking quite good. It's going to be tough to kind of go against it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's just a FOMO about Haaland. You're going to think, you know what, I can't overlook that. But I've so much fear about what he could possibly do to you if you haven't triple captain and that EO is above 200%.
Yeah, I think if you are close to a bench boost and you can get there with maybe even just a -4 hit, then it does make a lot of sense. I do understand the argument for it. And I think one of the key arguments is that there aren't really many other good times that we can confidently say a bench boost is going to be very, very optimal. So 37 is one that a lot of people are looking at the moment, and I will probably be going down that strategy as well, by the way. However, most people will be wildcarding quite a few weeks before game week 37 anyway, and we all know that setting up 15 strong players for a bench boost is always hard work, especially if you're planning a few weeks in advance. So injuries will come in, rotation will come in, especially because it's so late in the season as well. So hits will probably have to fly just to make sure you realign yourself to the perfect bench boost in game week 37. And even if you do, because we're so late in the season, because some teams just simply won't have much riding on it at that point, picking the correct 15 at that point is still going to be a gamble. They still could get rested, rotated. etc., etc. So I do understand the logic of bench boosting now if you're close. Just get it out of the way, wildcard into a really strong 11, like you say, not worry about your bench too much, and pile in on the best possible 11 players that you could have for the money. That being said, though, I think the triple captaincy chip is so far and away best used in this game week. I think unless you are very, very close to bench boosting anyway, and you're happy enough triple captaining a weaker player, but also in a decently attacking side against two very good fixtures in Solanke, that is, in game week 28, or taking a gamble that something pops up in game week 37 that is also fairly appealing, then I think that it just makes a lot of sense to triple captain this game week, get it done, and focus on things like the free hit and the bench boost around the wild card, and try to string those together a little bit in the back 10 game weeks.
I mean, the only sort of, I know that I've heard loads of people kind of doom mongering about 37. I'm not suggesting you are, but I know you're kind of, it's kind of appreciable caution. I think
Sure,
the only thing I would say is that a lot of the time it's probably fine. It was absolutely, I've got no problem at all after many years of struggling with trying to get kind of 30 players on the double game week for bench boost. It's absolutely fine to just have good single game week as bench boosted. I was absolutely
of course,
no problem with that, and that sort of bails you out a little bit. I mean, even though, yes, I agree with you, there's probably going to be some sort of ifs and buts about this. I'm pretty sure, we might end up. I'm sure we'll end up with like Spurs players, for example. They've got Burnley at home in game week 37. I'm pretty sure we'll have Man City players. They've got Fulham away that week. I'm sure these teams may have double game weeks that week. I haven't looked that far ahead, to be honest with you. But there's always going to be ways around it, and who knows who's in form, quote unquote, around that. So there's loads of different ways that you can kind of skin that particular cat. I wouldn't be too worried about kind of waiting until 37 if that's something that's going to really upset you, and think, oh, I've got a boost now because 37 is going to be an absolute disaster zone. It rarely is, and normally it's absolutely fine to just have single game weekers who've got a good game. Usual odds of a single game week are doing all right. Like most given weeks, you're going to have 3 or 4 players in your team doing something, at least at the very minimum, unless we get kind of those 29 pointers that we've had not too deep and not too recent past. So yeah, I don't think it's too bad at all. But yeah, there are always pros to bench boosting early. It's just that it very much depends on where your team is, and I think that kind of idea of hashtag team dependency again also filters into the best transfers this week, because obviously there are those 4 teams, and I think it's almost definitely going to be the case that we'll be looking at those players from those teams. I don't know, like, if you don't have Saka, for example, and they've got Burnley away, maybe you'd be looking at that. But I'm sure everybody's been looking at double game because let's not lie. And I think maybe it's best to kind of look at each team in turn potentially, and kind of just assess kind of where they are and how things are. So I'll give kind of a stat rundown for them, and then we can kind of discuss them perhaps, especially in terms of Man City and Liverpool. I think it might be the third player that might be the most interesting thing if you are kind of looking to buy more. Starting with Man City, so the 4th best team in terms of XG, 2nd best in terms of XGC. In terms of the non-penalty SGI numbers, Haaland's top, obviously, 2nd overall. Alvarez is the 2nd best Man City asset in terms of non-penalty SGI. He's 8th overall this season, equal with Son, 12.8. Foden is 15th overall this year, 10.1, and then Bernardo, somewhere down in the depths, 6.5 is the 5th best, is the 4th best at Man City kind of asset in terms of non-penalty SGI. And Ake is their highest scoring defender on that metric. In terms of the projections this week on FPL Review, Foden top, as I mentioned earlier, Haaland top, as I mentioned earlier on, Foden with 9.9, KDB 9.8, so kind of 2 sides of the same coin. Ederson, the highest projected scoring defensive asset, and Alvarez down at 7.8. Interesting one there, Sam. You texted me something earlier, which I immediately got out the shut up, bro. Give me your phone.
Yeah.
You've had too much beer. There's a world in which I buy Ederson this week. Would you mind explaining that, just so I can laugh?
It's highly dependent. Obviously, I think there is one universe. If we were in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's one of the multiverse scenarios, but looking at some different routes I could take if Trent isn't fit. And one of the questions we got in the chat was about potential Trent replacements if he's not fit. If we got news that he was a big doubt, probably not going to get good minutes, then rather than going for Ake and Alisson, for example, as the two I bring in, I could switch that and go for Van Dijk with Ederson potentially. Now that would give me two extra double game weekers, selling one, so I'd be up to 6 overall, which I think is fine. Also without a hit as well, and it also means that I can navigate the next couple of game weeks pretty reasonably as well. I think it'd be 1 hit in game week 26. And then I could also maybe take 1 hit to pile into the double game week. And I think I could get myself up to 3 or 4 double game week players in game week 28 on that strategy as well. So it's definitely not my favored move at the moment, but there is a set of scenarios where that is the way I go. I think one reason that it does tempt me a little bit is because at the moment, we're obviously trying to search out that third City asset. For me, I can't really get to KDB without ripping apart my team and selling Saka, who I just don't want to sell ahead of the Burnley game. With that in mind, I look towards the defence and goalkeepers, obviously, for City assets, where in defence in particular, there aren't any defenders that I would confidently say get 2 starts in that double game week. I think the most likely, you've already mentioned, is Ake. He's also the most attacking in terms of the underlying data of those defenders too. So I do really like him. He is the more likely route I take. But even I am a little bit hesitant and I'm thinking in the back of my mind, Pep could easily rest him in one of these games and he would get like maybe 5 minutes off the bench, which we have seen him do with Ake before because of his height, because he's very good from the set pieces. If they're trying to close out a match or trying to win it in the last few minutes, Ake could be a player that comes on for 5 minutes to try and either shore up the defense or attack the set pieces. So this is like a 2% worry about Ake at the moment, but it is a consideration that if I went for Ederson and Van Dijk, I'm pretty much banking 180 minutes in both cases. Whereas with the other route, it's probably more like 150 and 180 on average. And there's the off chance that Ake annoys me, but then also in in single game week 26, when a lot of other players are blanking, Ake could also get rested then. And I'm really in trouble because I'm taking a hit to get out 11 anyway. If Ake also doesn't play, then I'm looking at 10 men.
I suppose that's definitely true. And a way of looking at this is that it's almost like a triple game week for Man City and Brentford. Because they've got like 26. Man City spacing a Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. Brentford's a little bit nicer, if I remember correctly. He's just pulling up the FPL website just to see. Saturday, Tuesday, Monday. So you've got more chance of the Brentford player kind of playing twice. But it's still, I don't know. I'm still kind of, I do quite like as the third Man City asset. I think assuming you own Haaland and probably one of Foden and KDB, I think the ideal probably would be Haaland, Foden, and KDB.
Yeah,
we're both in a situation where we can't quite do that. So if you do want a third one, which I think both of us are kind of set on, and kind of reflecting my my bold claim, my kind of inclination at the moment is to have a punt on Ake, really, if I were to kind of bring in another City player. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like both the teams that they are playing, there will be a need for Ake's height. Potentially.
Certainly the Brentford game, I would say, yeah.
We'll have to see what happens with the Copenhagen, and we'll try to kind of do some tea leaf reading. Yeah, you're right. Maybe Chelsea. I'm kind of just hoping for the best, and maybe it'll be Brentford and Bournemouth will be the 2 games where Ake will be needed. I don't know. I quite like the fact that Ake is kind of ex-Chelsea and ex-Bournemouth. It's one of those where you look at it and think, oh, will he be extra motivated to score goals? Choose that adventure. Choose it. And yes, highest non-penalty try for defenders amongst Man City players seems to be, in the past there's been kind of a bit of a revolving door in terms of which defender seems to be the bedrock of that defense. In the past, it's been Ruben Diaz, Laporte, who's obviously not around anymore, Stones. But this season, it does seem to be Ake who's been given that sort of, he's in the circle of trust, I guess, for Pep. Started every game since game week 16, which of course now means that he's going to end up on the naughty step, doesn't it, Sam? But I think that, you know, he definitely has sort of the upside. Man City's got a defensive sort of solidity as well on paper, at least, to mean that it's kind of fine with him. I don't know. I just can't countenance buying Edison. I just can't. I've had more than enough, and both of us have got Leno anyway. So they've got 26 goalkeeper and 29 goalkeeper. It just does not seem worth it to me. Yeah. Right, Liverpool then. Best for team XG, third best for XGC. In terms of the team non-pen XGI this year, Salah is number one for them, and not number one overall as well. Obviously, potentially less consideration with this double. I suspect that with the three Darwin, Jota, and Diaz scoring this game week, and indeed have been kind of upholding the banner fairly well during Salah's absence, I don't think he's going to be rushed back. No, again, choose your own adventure, but I don't think that's going to be the case. If you held Salah this long, then maybe you just kind of just keep him now and play him. Wouldn't captain him though. Darwin's actually third overall for non-penalty SGI in the league, 16.2, not far off Haaland at all. Luis Diaz down in the trenches, 39th. Trent very near him, 43rd. Again, wait for updates on Trent. We don't know what the situation is with him and his fitness, and we've heard all sorts of rumours. I'm sure you all have as well about his kind of enduring fitness. And Jota and Szoboszlai are both joint on 6.3. Jota's been out for a fair little while. FPL review wise, Darwin is seen as kind of the top scorer potentially this double game week, followed by Luis Diaz and Jota, very close together. I haven't messed with the X minutes, so Jota's X minutes are fairly low on FPL review. If you up them, I'm sure it'd be better than Diaz, maybe close to Darwin. And then there's Virgil and there's Robbo there. I think the inherent sort of expectation that Trent's going to be out for a little while. So I think the two on screen you've watched on YouTube of Darwin and Jota, those are the ones that I suppose that, you know, I think most people did kind of get to them last week. So a lot of people sort of a misfortune as well, because a lot of people did sell Saka for Jota. But it does feel like those two, Sam, do seem to be the most sort of popular out there.
Yeah, I would certainly say they're the two locks that I would have as Liverpool players this game week if you can get to them. You say everyone went for them last week, but the effective ownerships on both were well under 100%. So there's still gains to be made. They're not being purchased by everyone just yet. It will rise yet again, but because all the captaincy is going to be on Haaland, I'd imagine that both of these will be fairly comfortably under 100 once again. And then I guess it's after that, who is the third most important Liverpool player to bring in? I think with City, it was fairly obvious, but with Liverpool, I think it is much more up in the air. Obviously, if Trent was fit, then it would probably be him. Outside of that, though, and because it's looking relatively unlikely that he is going to be fit enough to start both, it becomes a bit of a minefield. Is it Alisson for the X-Mins? Is it Van Dijk for the same reason and adding in some sort of bullet header in one of the double game week fixtures? Or is it chasing the upside like we mentioned earlier with Luis Diaz? And I think for my money, my preference at the moment would be Van Dijk out of the three I've just mentioned. But second, not far behind, would be Alisson either, if you don't mind spending a little bit more on a keeper. I think a lot of people who have triple Liverpool are Trent owners at the moment, and if he is a question mark, I think it's just an easier switch to Van Dijk than it is to get across to Alisson. So that would probably be my answer for the time being.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I quite fancy Robertson as well, to be honest.
Yeah, good shout.
There's no real issue there. And if we do kind of get issued with the idea that Trent's likely going to miss both games, then Conor Bradley, if you can afford to bench him in 26, just becomes a bit of a standout, doesn't he, really, at 4.1? Could be just a really outrageous kind of pickup, especially because they missed 26 and they got Forest in 27, and maybe be able to bench him in 28 as well against Man City. And either him, Virgil, or Robertson would be fine. Virgil for being on the end of the corners, and Robertson for taking the corners. Both absolutely fine to me. Robertson's first 90 minutes against Burnley, wasn't it? Since the shoulder injury. But
that would make me worry though a little bit.
I mean, Gomez has been acquitting himself well, but I mean, if Conor Bradley Gomez kind of both play one game apiece, I wouldn't be surprised to see Robertson just come back into it, because it's his shoulder, isn't it? It's not kind of a general an injury which is kind of affecting his body. Hashtag armchair physio.
Simicast as well, though. So there are other options. He's back in the fold now.
Is he fit?
Yeah,
Okay.
he is. He got minutes the other day, I think.
Oh, it's all over. It's all over. Ignore me. Yeah. So Virgil.
I do think he's still a good option, though.
Yeah, so I think probably Virgil then has to be the one. He got 1 minute, Sam.
1 minute, yeah. So that's
minutes.
It's not
minutes. Is it minute?
Minutes.
He got minute. Yeah, it doesn't sound good. You got minute the other day. I'm just being correct. I'm being graphically correct. So I sound like a weirdo. Yes. So yeah, third player. I think if they didn't have the 26 blank, I'd be all over Van Dijk. Honestly, I would be, like, because it obviously got 90 minutes in the bag, unlike Ake, where there's always going to be kind of, could he end up playing, Jamal Lewis, Akanji, and Stones and Walker? That's obviously eminently
You mean
possible.
Rico Lewis?
Yeah, Rico Lewis. What did I say?
Jamal
Lewis. Oh, that's the wrong Lewis entirely. Hey, there you go. Could that happen? Possibly, almost definitely. In fact, I'm sure we'll see that happen at some point. Whereas with Van Dijk, he's going to play. It's just kind of moving everything around afterwards is going to be a pain in the arse. So probably not for me, even though I quite like it. And obviously, if you buy a Liverpool player in this week and you were able to kind of keep them for 27 against Nottingham Forest, that'd be fine. But you've got to get rid of them really for 28 for the Man City game anyway, and then the 29 blank too. So yeah, Virgil, I suppose, is the third. But I don't mind if you do have a plan for Luis Diaz. I noticed that everybody seems to be piling in on the two that we've mentioned. I'm sure it was that Jota's the second most bought and Darwin's the third. Yeah, it is. Yeah, they're both kind of second and third most bought, and they're around the sort of same level of buys, around 150k, something like that. And Diaz is kind of sat kind of in differential status right now, less owners than Darwin, half the owners of Darwin. So if you didn't own Jota and you just fancied a bit of differential, why not? Why not go there? Okay. Great. So on to teams that we may not have even one for. Brentford. So Brentford are 8th best for XG and still 4th best for XGC, as we noticed a little while back. Really decent XGC, but seems to be conceding a lot, as is every team in the Premier League right now. Mostly irrelevant in terms of the overall rankings, in terms of non-pen XGI. Bumo's obviously injured. Visser is out of favour. He's still kind of in the 30s somewhere. Mopay is actually the third highest for non-pen XGI in the team. He's around sort of Luis Diaz and Trent levels with 7.2 non-pen XGI this year. And then there's Yanal, Norgard, all these sort of no-hoper kind of individuals around 5-ish. And the best defenders are Pinnock, 2.7, pretty paltry. And Region, Tony, they haven't been around for anywhere near long enough, of course, to really matter. In terms of FPL review, Tony obviously top 7.3, Flecken 6.3 expected points, and then you've got Norgard, my man Jensen, and Yanal all expected to get kind of 4.4-ish. I said earlier on, Brentford are quite attractive because they've got the 25 double, they've got 26. And they've also got 29. So that could be a big positive. For me, I think I'm going to swerve them entirely for the time being. Tony probably will come in for me later on down the line, and probably looking at kind of Slanky straight in, and then him Slanky again out in 29 for Tony. But I noticed if you look at the top transfers out this game week, okay, a lot of people are going for Haaland, but the people who are selling Solanke, 175,000 have sales for him. Same with Alvarez, 160,000 sales for Watkins. There's got to be quite a lot of people buying Tony as well, who's got kind of 86,000 buys in. I think that Haaland, Darwin, Tony, if I was free hitting this week, would be the kind of the front three of choice. I mean, are you tempted to break the tenets of what we said about Watkins and bin him off for Tony, Sam?
As it stands, no. I don't know what it is. I love Ivan Tony as well. Both Watkins and Tony I've got a real soft spot for, but Watkins has just been so consistent this season. Even against Man United, he did blank, but he had a couple of really good chances. His underlying data was actually better than the week before when he got 18 points. So I think he was just unfortunate, and that happens for a striker every now and then. Now, obviously, Tony is fantastic. He's got double the amount of games in game week 25 than Watkins has, but Watkins has got the better fixture than Tony has in either of those games, and then also stumbles into a really decent run after that as well, and also plays in game week 29. So really, it's just a straight shootout between do you think over the next stretch of fixtures, Watkins will be a decent enough hold and is going to outscore Tony? I would say, or for at least the period that I don't plan on having Tony. And I would say that there's a decent chance that he does outscore him. So I'm pretty happy holding on to Watkins for the time being, especially also in my situation. If I sell Watkins for Tony, it would probably be for a hit. I should mention that because there are other moves that I definitely want to prioritize first before I would make that one. So again, the -4 weighs into that decision. But overall, I'm pretty happy as a Watkins owner. I think he's been performing fantastically recently, ticking over very nicely. Great fixtures to come, great underlying data, and a fixture in game week 29 as well. I think by the time we get to 29, I will also have Tony, but it won't be at the expense of Watkins unless something changes later on this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, yeah, he's got a double this week, Tony, but it's Liverpool at home, Man City away, two of the best defences in the league. Watkins has got Fulham away. We've got Leno, so that means he's going to concede a buttload of goals to Mr. Watkins this week, I'm sure. And then, yeah, you're right. So 26-28, I don't intend to own Tony for those. Watkins has got Forest at home, Luton away, Spurs at home, versus Brentford having West Ham away, Chelsea at home, and Arsenal away. Yes, Tony is one of those players who is perhaps fixture proof, to use that horrible cliche, but still, people are welcome to be selling Watkins as far as I'm concerned. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and I don't think I'll be doing it again. And plus, he's got that 29. So you'll be cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're probably going to want him again in 29 for West Ham, especially if West Ham are as abject as they were against Arsenal. I'm sure there'll be a reaction there. But still, yeah, I don't know. But with Brentford, Sam, I suppose the only sort of real tempter is either Flecken or Reguilon. But
yeah,
even then, Reguilon, the fixtures aren't great. Next kind of three, I suppose, Liverpool, Man City and West Ham, none of them fill me with much hope, to be honest, of any sort of return. Yeah, you were hoping for a lucky assist, obviously he's on corners as well. So maybe that could be something. But Flecken, I suppose, would be the only one I go to. And if I was bench boosting this week, I'd definitely be buying him in straight away. But other than that, I'm just not particularly interested. The only kind of thing that has crossed my mind is moving Leno out for Flecken. That's the only way I think that's the only thing I potentially would be interested in doing, I think, if I was approaching Brentford or wanting to make a different defensive transfer this week. But I don't really see, the upsides is so random, isn't it, with goalkeepers? It's just difficult to really quantify.
Yeah, I think the problem with Brentford defenders at the moment is you really don't expect clean sheets in either of those games. I mean, who knows? They could pull off a really big upset and not concede against one of those two clubs. But both of those clubs are on fire at the moment, especially from an attacking point of view. I'd be very surprised if they kept them out. And then obviously with Flecken in mind, you're just relying on save points, and you're not only relying on those save points coming in, but you're also relying on those save points outweighing the amount of goals he concedes, because for every 2 he concedes, it's -1 anyway. So you're hoping that he actually has a really good save to conceded ratio in that double. So it's not going to be an easy one to navigate. Who knows? He might keep a clean sheet at random or get a pen save, but I think it's not enough for me to want to dive on him at this point. I think for me personally, out of the keepers, Kaminsky would be slightly more interesting because I can hide him in game week 26 anyway, with Leno playing that game week, then get an extra double in 28 as well. So I think he would potentially make more sense as a secondary keeper, but obviously not the only playing keeper I'd have in my team. I'd have to have him as a squad rotation keeper.
Yeah, nice segue to Luton there as well.
Mhm.
So fourth bottom team for Team XG still, despite the recent tear, and second bottom for Team XGC. Adebayo is their best player in terms of non-pen XGI. Same non-pen XGI as Jota, 6.3. Then kind of Barkley, or Bene and Morris, they're kind of around kind of 5-ish. And then Doughty, non-pen XGI as best among defenders, of course. In terms of FPL review, Adebayo and Kaminsky. Oh, there's a goal, Sam. Are kind of top for that. And then Barkley, Morris, and then Doughty are kind of 4.8. But as you say, there's a lot of interest in Kaminsky. Gallagher scored again.
Wow.
Yeah. Remember he was an FPL asset when he was at Palace.
Yeah.
I think I saw earlier on that he scored his most goals against Palace as well as a player. So there you go.
It's even more now.
Yeah, exactly. Loves them. Anyway, yeah, Luton.
Palmer assist.
Oh, lad, finally points.
Lovely stuff.
So Luton then, I suppose it's Kaminsky. I do like Doughty. Obviously you're buying with them. It's an interesting one because obviously I said Brentford were in that kind of Goldilocks zone of having 29, and the odds are, if things do kind of go to as the bookies odds say they will go, the odds are that Luton will have that 29 versus Nottingham Forest. They have the double obviously in 28, got the double now. So if you do buy a Luton player, maybe even get 2 Luton players, the hope is, I suppose, if you can navigate 26, that you've got double in 28 and you've got a game in 29. So basically you're buying 1 extra game, 2 extra games, maybe even 3 extra games by going there. You've got none at the moment. Any thoughts of moving to maybe a Doughty, or would it be the case that you just leave it until 28 potentially?
I do like Doughty. I think the attacking upside is there more so than with any of his other teammates in defence, and also than the Brentford assets in defence as well. We've seen the amount of chances he creates is kind of ridiculous for a player in a team like Luton. So I do like him a lot. Structurally, it doesn't really work for me at the moment because I'm already carrying 3 Liverpool at the moment. If I swap out 1, then it's just another blanker in game week 26 anyway. I've also got Palmer and Porro to worry about too. So I think for my structure, it doesn't really work that well. But I do completely understand the temptation to go there. I will be crossing my fingers that he doesn't get a couple of assists in the double, which I think is possible. I think with Luton players in mind, as I mentioned earlier, Kaminsky probably makes the most sense from a strategic point of view because he's another player that you can hide on your bench in game week 26 without worrying about having to make a transfer. So with all the other Luton players you bring in, or the extra Liverpool players, you've got to have a plan for how you're either going to sell them again in game week 26 to make sure you've got a starting 11, or you've got a maximum of 3 of them on your playing outfielders on the bench. So with Kaminsky, we've obviously not got that problem. So it means that you can actually bring up your maximum amount of blankers that game week to 4 rather than 3 and still have a full playing 11. So yeah, I can see Kaminsky being probably a decent pickup, but not expecting necessarily too much from the double, maybe a few save points here or there. But yeah, over the next few game weeks, it might pay off. With Doughty, I think it's more difficult because there are other doublers we want, and players that would then blank in game week 26 that we want to hold. But if you can get to him, then it does make a lot of sense.
Lovely. No, I think it certainly makes a lot of sense. And Palmer's got another assist.
Lovely.
Brucey bonus.
Wow.
Bonus. Thanks, Rob Jones, in the chat for letting me know. If I was on Twitter right now, I'd be writing PAA. Yeah, anyway, God, I'm a loser. But yes, absolutely. Good question in the chat earlier on. Now we've kind of gone through it, and we've mentioned a couple of players already. Who's your favourite under the radar pick for double game week players this week? Asked Nathan Jacobson. So, I mean, we've both mentioned Ake as potential buys in. I think we both kind of like that as a potential. I mean, you've got kind of Doku and Bernardo Silva, I'm not sure about them really. And Diaz, I think, and Van Dijk would both kind of qualify. Rob's just said in the chat about Carlton Morris being on pens for Luton, which is another potential sort of string in his bow.
Yeah.
I just don't see where the space is really in the forward line really for him, Rob. But it is definitely one. Same with Adebayo. That if you want to go there, sure, why not? I don't know. I think maybe I know we've kind of spoken about them, but maybe kind of Ake or maybe a Diaz are the ones to go with. I mean, if it was a free hit situation, I'd certainly be going with Jota, Diaz, and Darwin, all three of them.
Would you? Interesting.
Yeah, if it didn't have Jota as well, I would be really tempted to just go with Diaz, knowing that I'd be having 1 week and then getting rid of him straight away. Just because on any given kind of small scenario, he could buy him in, couldn't you? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, we've mentioned him already, but Robertson would be a very nice little differential. We know the upside's there. The ownership's going to be extremely low. It is just a question of whether or not he starts both games so soon after coming back from the injury, and with Tsimikas, Gomez waiting in the wings. But the upside is there. He's on set pieces as well. You can visualize the header from someone like Van Dijk in the box from one of his corners as well. Outside of that, you're just because we kind of skimmed over him a little bit earlier, but I found it really interesting that Neil Mapai actually has a better underlying XGI per 90 than Ivan Toney, his teammate, so far this season, which is obviously very short sample size. But I did find it very, very entertaining that Mapai actually technically has been doing better on the underlying data so far than Toney. No one in their right mind is going there. I completely understand that, especially because they've got probably 3 or 4 other strikers they fancy over even Ivan Toney, perhaps. But if you wanted to be mega differential, if you wanted to free hit this week and you wanted to bring in someone that absolutely nobody is going to own, and maybe even whack the armband on him and get the acclaim of FPL Twitter when he randomly gets 30 points, then Mapai has the data. It could happen. I just think it is fairly unlikely that it actually does.
If you've owned Darwin, you've seen nothing yet when it comes to Mapai. If you ever owned him when he was at Brighton, my God, the guy was an absolute machine for missing chances and stuff, and Everton as well, of course. All right, that's the final bit this week. Selling single game weekers. So has some sense been trampled by the rush for doublers? Adam Pritchard asked, questions surrounding this. Basically, is it worth taking hits to take out single game weekers for the likes of Liverpool players, etc.? Solanke, Bowen, Watkins, Porro, Richarlison, Saka, all on the list of players who have been sold by upwards of 50,000 managers. I don't know. Difficult one to really judge, and it's all hashtag team dependent. But broadly, in terms of the non-pen XGI data, Watkins 4th overall. Yes, you said he blanked this weekend, so maybe there's going to be people going, "Oh, he's blanked," and Tony's done another goal and bring him in. But as you said, 2 big chances missed. Underlying data is obviously great. Saka 5th overall, finally exploded, back on pens, and also Burnley. Slanky, who's being sold quite heavily, 7th overall for non-pen XGI, albeit now back to 6.9. Probably an easy buyback, so I can get more behind that one, to be honest with you. Gordon, Richarlison, Palmer, 13th, 16th, 17th overall by that metric. Palmer 2 assists just now, so that means he's kind of even higher there. And Porro, he's actually the highest ranking defender in terms of non-pen XGI this season, 27th, marginally better than Trippier. So, Sam, selling single game weekers to link us back all together with the contemplate section, it does feel like it has to be something taken with caution, doesn't it? And from what I said a second ago, if you're selling the likes of Slanky and definitely selling the likes of Bowen, then there's kind of buyback ability with those players, especially with Solanke having dropped in price. But there are a few, especially the 2 on the screen if you're watching on YouTube's with Watkins and Saka, where you'd be looking at that and thinking, it's a bit more of a tough decision, especially in Saka's case.
Yeah, I think Saka's the one that I think because he's now scored the 2 goals, people have clocked onto the fact that he is going to be a very good hold against Burnley. So hopefully that puts off some managers from going for KDB, and it means that he's not over 100% EO, which I'm very scared he will be, or at least close to. But Saka in his own right is going to be fantastic this week. Burnley are a bit all at sea at the moment. I do like the look of that Arsenal fixture for them. I like the look of the Arsenal fixture against Burnley rather. There's no way I want to be selling Saka unless it was for one of the most essential players, and that would have to be not for a hit. And again, longer term as well, he's a very good hold. Obviously, 29 is looking likely that he's going to blank, but outside of that, I think if you can even shield him on the bench in game week 29, then he's just a player that's putting up ridiculous underlying data. He's on penalties in a side that it is really hitting its verve at the moment. It's really, really looking like a team that know how to score goals all of a sudden. Whatever they did on their little winter break has worked. His underlying data is, I think, 0.8 XGI per 90, which is ridiculous for a midfielder of his price. So, yeah, I really think he is quite important to hold on to if you've already got him. Outside of that, Watkins, I think, is probably one notch down, but still very important to hold on to if you can. We've already discussed Tony. I think that will be the main transfer. Watkins to Tony, I see that happening, or Watkins to Darwin perhaps. But generally speaking, I would try and hold on to Watkins unless you have to sell. Richarlison's one that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. Where, if you owned Richarlison at this point, where would you be at? Obviously, single game week this week against Wolves, good game, but not a great game. It's not as good as Burnley away from home for Saka, for example. But obviously, Son back, so he's probably on pens now, so that reduces Richarlison a little bit. Blank in game week 26 as well. Where would you stand on Darwin on Richarlison at the moment?
I suppose I'd then be looking at 27 versus Palace, 28 versus Villa, which
so
is
you tried to hold him,
game, and then Fulham away in 29. It would depend. Hashtag independent. I guess again, it depended on how much money I had bound up in him, I suppose, and how much sort of, I guess, efficiency, EV, whatever you want to put it, is in the transfer to sell him off. I'm not sure that I'd be doing it. Obviously, highly team dependent. But I'm just not sure I'd be doing it, honestly, at the moment. But I think there's less of a case for selling him than there is for Bowen, for example, who's in a similar sort of boat, I suppose, but is playing for a team that I'd be less sort of infused about retaining an asset from.
Absolutely, yeah. Bowen, I'd be fairly comfortable selling, to be honest.
But against Bryson, for example, his underlying data again for Richarlison that was pretty good, so it won't be one where I'd be looking at it thinking, he's definitely kind of worth selling. It's similar sort of choose your own adventure to Watkins, really. What do you need to do to convince yourself to sell these players? Well, it might just be he blanked the last game and I fancy a Luis Diaz for reasons that we've discussed. So I can see a world where that would be absolutely fine. It's just basically how it then kind of has, I keep thinking the word downstream, for those downstream sort of impacts on your team and how you're going to make that all sort of fit together. That kind of where I am with all of that. So yeah, selling single game week players, I guess, Sam, it's always a fraught exercise, and especially when it comes to a few performers, it's going to be very difficult because if this week was a different week, obviously if my aunt was my uncle, blah blah blah, but if this week was a different week and the fixtures weren't as kind for a lot of the top 10, then we'd be looking at it thinking, you know what, screw it. Of course, we just kind of lean into it a bit more. But as it is, there are so many teams with a decent single game week that you kind of think, well, you know what, actually, it's probably not that incumbent on me to be selling. So yeah, it's always about balance and weighing it all up, yada yada yada. Cool. Anything else to add in all this?
Not particularly. Just to wrap up what you said there very correctly, I think just in so many seasons past when I've ended up selling a good asset that I like owning, with good underlying data with a single game week fixture, so often I've been burnt by bringing in the double game week that I just feel like most of the time it just doesn't work when you're selling players like Saka, like Watkins. So yeah, especially for a hit as well. So just be ultra careful that you have mapped it out with several game weeks vision in front of you as well. Obviously, unless you're wildcarding in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, even though it does expend a bit of cognitive load, it's definitely worth it. And as I said earlier on with the involvement stuff, it's definitely where you're going to find your edge, just to put a tiny bit of thought into it. Often, especially in the main season, a bit of thought can obviously be counteracted by luck. But in this kind of period, a little bit of planning can go a long way. That's kind of where I go with that. Cool. All right. Our teams for this week then.
On to you.
Is me first. So triple captain is active and it is on Erling Haaland. And I've got Gordon, I've got Palmer. Or I could use that slot to get Ake in for Burn and put him on the pitch and do 4-3-3. I could bench Porro. I've got that sort of I've got this balance again. Like, what do I do if I want to add another kind of double game week? So I've got Doughty, I've got Jota, I've got Foden, I've got Darwin, I've got Haaland, double game weeking, and I've got the rest of my team is all full of good single game weekers: Saliba, Saka, Watkins, Porro at Wolves at home, and I've still got Gordon, who's got Bournemouth at home after some miraculous recovery. Although at the moment, maybe I just play Palmer, to be honest, rather than Gordon. Maybe I just do that right now. So there's definitely a feeling that I just roll it, because that's going to be much better for me downstream. Do I want to do that now, or do I want to lean into the double? That's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about over the course of this week. I'm not entirely sure. I do need to get rid of Burn. Like, his time is surely nigh for your man Tino Livramento to come in. Again, been absolutely roasted by an opposing fullback, and that's by an opposing winger, and that's going to be every opposition's playbook going forward, surely, to just basically destroy the left-hand side of Newcastle's defence. So that's an enduring problem. Next week, if I do roll it, I'm going to have to remove probably Burn, probably Gordon, and then take out one of the blanket. I don't know. I'll figure it all out. But yeah, at the moment, I'm stuck between basically a roll or getting a doubler and having a really awkward bench situation. I'm really close to a bench boost here, to be honest.
You are so close. Yeah.
All I would do is get rid of Burn, get rid of Turner. I've got a bench boost ready and waiting to go. Do I want to do it? I don't know. It's just hard to say no to Haaland at the moment, really, with the triple captaincy. So I think that might be what I do. But yeah, there's definitely a big case to bench boost. So it's something that I will think about, but I'm kind of 70-30 that I'll triple captain, and I think maybe 60-40 I might just roll it at the moment and make a decision between Palmer and Gordon for this week going forward. I mean, Man City, not exactly despite the SUC, the tightest defence going. So there we go. What about you?
Yeah, so fairly similar situation. I do have 5 double game weekers. The problem with my 5th is that it's Trent rather than Doughty, so he's a big doubt. I really, really hope that he is given the all clear that he's going to be fit to start, but I doubt that's going to come, so I think that's going to be an issue. I do have free transfers, only 0.1 in the bank, so like I mentioned earlier, one combination I'm looking at is a combo of Alisson or Edison with either Ake or Van Dijk, potentially as the double switch. Wouldn't need to take a hit, brings me up to 6 double game weekers. And also, if I'm bringing in Alisson in goal, for example, it means that I'm a little bit better covered off next game week, and I think I can either get to a full 11, but that includes Charlie Taylor, sadly, for no hit, but obviously then it's an 11 selling Taylor or finding another spot that's more reliable for a -4, which isn't too bad at all. But yeah, generally speaking, really happy with the way it's set up. Garnacho was starting over Palmer, but that was very much a bus team consideration based on fixture. I'm very 50-50 on that particular decision. I think maybe just the fact that Palmer just seems inevitable at the moment. I might just want to shield myself a little bit there against his old club. Chelsea obviously gave them a really good game last time out as well. So I can see points there. And obviously on penalties, which Garnacho just doesn't have in his locker. And I'd be lying if I said effective ownership didn't come into that decision a little bit as well. So I think Palmer probably shades it as it stands. Estupinian as well, probably not a million miles away from starting, but based on how poor he's been in the last couple of fixtures, I'm pretty happy to just leave him on my bench, even against Sheffield United away from home as it stands. I like the upside of Porro. I really like the upside of an Arsenal centre-back against Burnley, who are the worst set-piece team in the league, or worst defending set pieces in the league. Arsenal are the best, and Saliba and Gabriel seem to have some sort of competition, some sort of bet on as to who can score more bullet headers this season. So yeah, I'm starting Saliba, no question. So yeah, 2 free transfers. Let me know if there's something I'm missing here that is obvious, because I could go in one of about a million different ways at the moment, but most likely double switch for one City, one Liverpool defender, goalkeeper.
Yeah, loads of it kind of hinges on Trent, doesn't it? Really?
That's
Your main question mark, and the rest of it sort of follows from there. As with similar to me, you're literally a Taylor and a Turner if Trent is fit away from a bench boost, aren't you?
Yeah.
I suspect this is going to be the same across the board. I think most people have got a strong front 8 now, as I said last week or the week before, and you could very easily do that. I don't know. It's definitely kind of on the table, isn't it? If it is kind of quite a interesting sort of idea. But yeah, it's all about Trent for you. And if Trent's not fit, then you've got a world of things. It might be worth just doing one move if that was the case, as you kind of said, just in Trent to Ake, and then have them 2 free transfers for 26. That's going to be like a massive positive for you, because then then you're kind of, how many bankers you got? 1, 2.
5 at the moment, I think. Yeah, 5 at the moment.
Yeah. So you'd be able to go into 26 without needing to take a hit, where I'll need to, and loads of other people need to.
That's one of those would be Taylor, though.
Okay, well, that might be all right. You never know.
It might be.
Even minutes of the bench is absolutely fine, isn't it? It's a really strong situation to be in. I envy you. So there we go. Well, thanks so much for listening. Just to say, upcoming FPL Meets event in London this Saturday. Usual frolics at the Thirsty Bear in Waterloo. Find it at FPL Meets on X and let them know if you're coming. I'll be there, which may put a few of you off attending. But just as a shout out, if you're thinking of coming alone and aren't sure, either come and find me when you get there, or DM me in advance and we can meet there. It's always great for that. It's really great to just meet other people who are into FPL and things like that. Really just get chatting and have a really good day. Really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, Sam, you can't make that one, right?
No, I can't. I usually do attend, but it is my girlfriend's birthday this Saturday, so I definitely can't get away with making that our birthday surprise for this year. I think I would get dumped if I tried to pull that one. So I'm sadly going to have to miss this one. But again, I can't recommend the FPL Meets higher. I remember the first one I went to, you were one of the first people I bumped into. You feel at home within 20 seconds of turning up, and obviously with the drinks flowing, football on in the background, it's going to be a triple captain week for a lot of us. So yeah, if you are in the London area, I would highly advise getting in contact and getting down there, because it will be a lot of fun. In the meantime, though, thank you all so much for listening. We've really enjoyed this show. Hopefully we've assisted you. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL. You can find myself at FPL Pricey. Instagram and Threads, we're also on WGTA.FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. If you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a follow on those social channels. But also, if you're listening in via Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, if you could give us a 5-star rating, that would be fantastic. And finally, if you're watching on YouTube, which a few of you are live right now, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, again, that would go a long, long way for us.
Great, thanks, Sam. We hope you enjoyed the pod. We'll have to figure out when we are back next week. Might be usual Monday night slot. I was going to potentially suggest Wednesday, but I've just heard there's a team event next Wednesday at work, so not going to happen. But we'll let you know. Have a good week. All the best for those tripling. Hope you think about the double game week ahead, and we'll speak to you very, very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?